Former President Trump finishing the second week of his criminal trial in New York City. That's as President Biden makes a striking shift by now pledging to debate former President Trump. Joining us now live is Antony's White House correspondent, Iris Tao, who's outside of that courthouse in New York. Good evening, Iris. What is the latest there today?
Good evening to you, Steve. So a lot happened at this courthouse in New York today, but first let's talk about the big development. That is President Biden, after for months declining to commit to a debate with Trump, today says he's happy to do it. And here's Trump responding to Biden's pledge just now outside the courtroom. Watch.
We're willing to do it Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, or Friday night on national television. We're ready. Just tell me where. We'll do it in the White House. That would be very comfortable, actually.
And in that speech, Trump also criticized Biden's EV policies and what he called Bidenomics. So there you can see Trump going straight into campaign mode despite being stuck at this courthouse. Meanwhile, at this trial today, we saw two new witnesses, one being a longtime assistant to Trump in the past, the other being a former banker to former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, who was allegedly involved in the alleged hush money payment. And meanwhile, the most crucial witness so far, though, is named David Pecker. He's the former publisher of the National Enquirer who spent days in testifying at this trial. Trump's lawyer, when questioning him, tried to show that Trump had nothing to do with an alleged conspiracy to, quote, buy and then bury negative stories to avoid harm to his 2016 campaign. And Trump's lawyers were arguing that despite Pecker's payment to former Playboy model and Karen McDougal, it's standard operating practice for publishers to do that, as he was doing as well to many celebrities. And Trump's lawyers were arguing that it's not a crime related to Trump. And here's Trump addressing this trial just now outside the courtroom. Watch.
Mark Levin, can't believe this is happening in our country. There's no case here. There's no case whatsoever. It's a disgrace. We have a conflicted judge, and it shouldn't be happening. Not in this country. Thank you very much.
And today is the last day of trial in week 2 of the hush money trial. And the next court proceeding we're going to see will be next Tuesday when it resumes. Steve.
So, Iris, obviously a monumental week this week between the Supreme Court hearing the oral arguments yesterday and now, obviously, where you are there in front of the courthouse in New York. What can we expect next week?
Right, so a big thing that we're watching for is how the judge in this case will rule on the alleged gag order violations by Trump that prosecutors have been bringing up and actually doubling down on this week. That could come as early as next week, as a hearing on them is set for next Thursday. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, we're going to see Trump campaigning in both Wisconsin and Michigan. So back on the campaign trail on the one day each week that he's not being able actually stuck in this courthouse. And also, as we heard Trump speaking, he's challenging President Biden now to debate him on weekday nights next week after, of course, he's done with court. So let's see if that drama is actually going to take place anytime soon. Steve.
We'll certainly be keeping an eye on that. Iris Tao in New York City. Thank you. And as the former President Trump his team finishes cross-examining the former National Enquirer publisher today, then calling Trump's former personal secretary from years prior to taking office as its second witness. Let's now bring in Michael Berry, Executive Director of the Center for Litigation at the America First Policy Institute. Michael Berry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, Michael, without directly watching the testimony in the courtroom, we're really relying on reports that then get filtered through commentary. Based on what you've heard thus far concerning David Pecker's testimony, is this going well for Trump, or should he be worried?
Well, at the outset, I think we should all be worried because this is really a show trial to begin with, right? I mean, let's back up a second and think about what this case is really about. It's a bookkeeping, I wouldn't even call it an error. It's just a bookkeeping function that Alvin Bragg has decided to shoehorn into somehow becoming a felony conspiracy crime. Of course, it's being tried in Manhattan in front of a judge that is clearly biased against President Trump. I think it's going to be very difficult to find a jury in Manhattan that's not going to be biased against President Trump. So if you're starting from that playing field, then obviously we have things to worry about. But then once you start getting into the facts and the testimony, that's where things, ironically, actually start to improve for President Trump, because the prosecution's case is so weak. And the witness testimony, again, like you said, I haven't been in the courtroom myself, but based on the reports that I'm hearing in commentary, they don't really have much of a case to begin with. But I don't think that's the point. I don't think they're actually looking for a conviction. I think what they're trying to do is tie President Trump up with so much litigation to keep him off the campaign trail, because every day he spends in court and every dollar he spends on his legal defense is time and money that he cannot spend on the campaign trail, and that's what the ultimate objective is here.
Trump's defense started to cross-examine Pecker, and Trump's attorneys argued that Pecker's work suppressing negative stories to help former President Trump during the 2016 election was nothing new or out of the ordinary. Pecker calling his business model checkbook journalism, if you will. Where is the crime here, and what is the prosecution going for in this, do you think?
There is no crime, right? First of all, I mean, people sign non-disclosure agreements all the time. I've signed many non-disclosure agreements just in the normal course of employment, right, of just doing business in America. And so to have, and then this catch and kill or capture and kill notion, and people, again, they make it sound so sinister and like, oh, it's hush money. I think it was an op-ed I saw from a law professor from a pretty left-leaning law school who said, hush money may be unseemly, but it's perfectly legal, right? You can pay somebody and say, look, I'm going to, in exchange for the money that I'm paying you, I'm asking you to sign a non-disclosure so that you won't talk about whatever the issue is. That happens all the time.
I want to switch gears a little bit and get your thoughts on oral arguments on Trump's claim of immunity before the Supreme Court yesterday. Much of the arguments focused on delineating between official and private acts in the indictment. Trump's lawyer argued that official acts have to be expunged now from the indictment. Does it sound like from Chief Justice John Roberts' questions that the court could send the case back to the lower court to make those distinctions? And then what would happen to the rest of the case?
Yeah, I think that's a very real possibility. I think we could have 5, potentially 6 of the justices who would agree that, look, this seems to have been rammed through the prosecution by Jack Smith. It wasn't handled very carefully or very precisely, and this needs to go back down to the lower court, whether it's the Court of Appeals or even the trial court, to determine which of these acts that you're accusing President Trump with were official acts and which ones are you accusing him of doing in his personal capacity as a private citizen. That in and of itself would be a huge victory for President Trump, because it would take months for that to be all untangled and figured out. And again, that would push us well into the late summer, possibly the early fall, and there just wouldn't be enough time left on the clock for them to prosecute President Trump before the November election. There's something called the Purcell Doctrine. It's a legal doctrine that basically says courts are not to hear cases or decide cases that could ultimately determine the outcome or influence the outcome of an election if those decisions are coming very, very close to the election itself.
Michael Berry, really appreciate you joining. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And turning now to the pro-Palestine demonstrations sweeping the country. With anti-Israel sentiment now on the rise, students and activists gathering at George Washington University to make their voices heard. Antony's Sam Wong has the story.
Pro-Palestine sentiment is running high on the campus of George Washington University. Behind the barricades, students have been camping out on school grounds since Thursday morning. Waving flags and chanting slogans, demonstrators appear to be undeterred by the heavy security presence in the surrounding areas. Activists and organizers are demanding that the university divest from companies tied to Israel because of the war in Gaza. Protesters are also asking authorities to drop all charges against pro-Palestinian students who were arrested.
This isn't going to end with peace until the Israeli officials, the U.S. officials, are prosecuted for being complicit in war crimes and genocide.
Killing Palestinians in the name of a Jewish state doesn't make anyone safe, and we have no business doing it.
The violence on Palestinians didn't start in October, and it's our responsibility to push back against that.
The university said the demonstrators had to clear out of the encampment by 7 p.m. Thursday. But up to this moment, the outrage carries on. Some fear the ongoing protests could trigger anti-Semitism on college campuses.
What they're doing is, they're just doing at the bidding of Hamas. You can't let Hamas continue what they're doing it. There won't be peace as long as Hamas is there.
The demonstrators were also joined by students and professors from other schools, including Georgetown, American, and George Mason universities, and the University of Maryland. Meanwhile, anti-Israel sentiment is picking up at schools across the country. It began with Columbia University in New York. Now at least 40 pro-Palestine camps have been established on different college campuses, from Boston to Atlanta to LA. And scuffles broke out this morning at the University of Southern California as police stepped in to disperse the crowd. Back in New York City, Columbia University set a 48-hour deadline on Wednesday for students to clear out. Now that the deadline has passed, the campus's main lawn remains occupied, as anti-Israel agitators refuse to back down. There has been a total of more than 500 arrests across American college campuses so far. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.